Good morning.
Why is it that the Labour Party was interested in Barnaby Joyce's ancestry?
I have to say that I'm not entirely clear on why Barnaby Joyce has named us in the way that he has. It's since been made very clear by DIA and the New Zealand High Commission that we weren't involved in the information that was passed on to Barnaby Joyce. It was as a result of inquiries from Fairfax in Australia that led them to ask questions and then contact Mr. Joyce. So we weren't involved in that, and I don't know why Mr. Joyce has named us in that way.
Now, Chris Hipkins did ask some questions, but that, as I understand it on the timeline, was after the media inquiries had started.
Yes.
So will, in that case, you be looking to have the record corrected in the Australian Parliament?
Oh, well, we've certainly sought to clarify this piece of information. I know that DIA and the New Zealand High Commission have certainly corrected the records themselves as well. But it's for Mr. Joyce to manage his situation. We're not too fussed about the fact that he's incorrectly named us. I imagine that he's probably got a lot of things on his mind, as anyone would in these circumstances. So for us, making sure the record's straight was important, but we're not going to be making anything formal to ensure the record's clear.
So there wasn't, to the best of your knowledge, anything around Labour trying to help out its Australian counterpart to pressurise or indeed to bring down the government?
Well, it's certainly, what's being made clear is it was Fairfax that triggered this. There were a set of questions that were asked by Chris Hipkins. I found out about those yesterday when the media story broke and contacted Chris to ask around the nature of the questions he'd asked. He's been very clear. Yes, someone from the ALP put some legal questions to him around citizenship. No mention was made of anyone's name. No rationale for any particular case being pursued was ever raised. He asked the questions without knowing how that might be used and has made it very clear in hindsight, had he known how it would be used, he would not have asked the questions.
OK, so speaking about extra New Zealanders that we seem to be getting, population growth figures showing the largest ever annual increase, 100,000 in a year, 72,000 of that net migration. Can New Zealand sustain growth at that level?
Yeah, we've been concerned about whether or not our particular areas of New Zealand can. It's something that we've raised some time ago. We see this as an infrastructure issue as much as anything else. New Zealand has been built off the back of support from those who have migrated to New Zealand and made it their home, and that will continue to be the case. Our concern is there hasn't been enough planning around population growth. We haven't necessarily targeted our skill shortages properly, and that means Auckland has borne the brunt of a lot of that growth. So while we need to play some catch-up, get our housing market rectified, ensure that we're dealing with our congestion issues, we should be finding ways to make sure then our skills gaps, where we do have them, allow migrants to come in and meet them, but often that will be in regions, not our cities.
So are you still wanting, I think in Andrew Little's words, to take a breather on immigration?
Yeah, our immigration policy remains the same. What I'm very clear on is I'm not fixated on numbers, I'm fixated on meeting the market need.
But nonetheless, people do need a sense of what you mean by taking a breather. So it was 20 to 30,000, I think, that he put his name to. Is that where you're looking at?
And off the back of some of the adjustments we've looked at making to some of the things like our labour market tests to make sure that we really are bringing in a workforce to meet skills gaps, making sure that we're doing that properly, making sure that our education system is we're bringing in people for high quality courses. All of that remains the same. We made estimates then about the impact that would have on numbers. But as I say, I'm much more focused on making sure that we're getting our system right. The numbers are simply guesstimates we make based on those adjustments.
Nonetheless, though, the numbers are important, especially in the run-up to the election. Yep. And because of where you were placing some of those, that was going to hit, for example, some of the education industry. So is 20 to 30,000 still pretty much the ballpark you're in?
That's still the estimate we have, but making it really clear, and we've done a lot of work to try and communicate this to our education sector. All we're trying to do is make sure that we're bringing in individuals into top quality courses. We're making sure they're not exploited, that we're giving people the best opportunity in our education system possible and maintaining our reputation. We think that's the right thing to do.
Okay, so the education industry is going to be significantly hit by the sound of that. What sort of economic impact is that going to be for New Zealand?
Yeah, and we've talked to the sector, just to be clear on the changes that we've suggested. We're simply saying that we want NZQA to make sure, in TEC, to make sure they're going and assessing these courses, and that we're only issuing visas for those that are coming out as being quality courses. And I think that's what New Zealanders would expect, and that's actually what our students who are coming into New Zealand would expect. The second change we've made is to say, actually by default, we're not going to assume that everyone who then comes in automatically has a right to work. It's got to be integrated. For some of those lower level courses, the right to work has to be integrated into the course. We're sitting down with the education sector though, and making sure that we've got those tweaks and adjustments right, and making sure that we're actually having impacts in the areas we want and not unintended consequences for that sector.
But what's the loss going to be for New Zealand financially?
Our estimates have been that it's within the education system. We do think it's manageable. We know it creates an enormous contribution.
What does
to
manageable
GDP
mean?
Yeah, well, as I say, I don't expect that we're going to see a massive hit to that sector. Labor was the one that introduced the ability to bring in international students into New Zealand. That includes in our tertiary system, that includes separate as our PTEs, and also even our secondary schools use international
will be a
education. Hit. Oh, look, it will have an impact, but again...
And your modelling, what does your financial modelling show of what the magnitude of that hit is, if you're able to put a number on that?
Yeah, we did do some estimates, but there's been some difference in what that sector has presented to us around what they anticipate and what we anticipate.
But do you have a sense of where exactly that sits?
Yes. I don't have that number right in front of me right now, but there has been a gap between what we've estimated and what the sector has. But as I've said, we're willing to sit down with the sector and make sure that what we intend and what that sector tells us we're likely to achieve, and bridge that gap, because they're anticipating an impact that we haven't.
But you will be talking millions here.
Oh, that has been some of the estimate that's been in that. But again, we make no apologies for the fact that if we are removing low quality courses from our system, that's the right thing to do.
Something else regarding immigration that a lot of people were uncomfortable about a few months ago, it came out, the Chinese sounding names released regarding housing. I'm sure you remember this one. Is that something that you would have been comfortable seeing on your watch?
That is, the impact of that was certainly not something I was comfortable with. The point that we were trying to make at that time was that the government hadn't acted on the issue of overseas speculators. We thought that was wrong. We maintain that that's wrong. We have a policy on that. We certainly didn't want to see any of our community here in New Zealand feeling targeted as a consequence of raising that issue.
The numbers were shonky. The data was pretty wobbly on that one. Was it also racist?
Oh, I certainly wouldn't assert that it was. If anyone felt that it was, then of course we would apologise for that, but that was not our intent.
Not your intent, but nonetheless, you'd have been happy if you'd been leader to put that out.
On the issue of whether or not we should have overseas buyers in New Zealand, I absolutely maintain it's the right thing to do to stamp down on that.
But exactly in that way?
Oh, I have discomfort from the way it's played out, absolutely. But I maintain the principle of what we've argued.
Just very briefly before you go, would you be happy to see Hone Harawira, looking at Te Tai Tokerau, would you want to see Hone Harawira win that seat and potentially provide Labour with another ally in Parliament? Not at all?
No.
But Kelvin's high on the list. Kelvin Davis, your deputy, he doesn't need to win that seat to get back anymore, does he?
Yes, and it's a result of our constitution, which as deputy requires him to be at number 2. And so that's what we've done. But Kelvin is very clear. He wants to hold that seat. It's important that he has that local representation. He's done an excellent job locally. He deserves to continue to hold that seat.
Thank you very much for your time. That's Jacinda Ardern, the leader of the Labour Party. Thank you very much for coming into the Wellington studio this morning. It's now 11 minutes to 8. Just a little.